All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to, I guess, the first official episode of Coffee Run with GM Espaleta. That's me. I realized I never got to introduce myself, but hey, I'm GM. Nice to meet you if you haven't met. And today, I felt like I wanted to talk about masters and grad school. I'm not exactly, the expert, the guru in whether you should do a master's or not, and everyone's context is different. But I can speak about it in terms of a lot of reflection, especially as I'm continuing or pursuing a master's, have applied for different master's degrees, and have had some thoughts in terms of what I would like to tell myself, especially the fresh grad GM or even college GM, what I wish I knew about masters and what you do need to take into consideration. So, yun, let's start. I think I really wanted to talk about this, shameless plug. I had a YouTube channel or have a YouTube channel, and a lot of the questions or engagement came from some of my videos that were about my master's degree. And I really just wanted to go on a more deep dive format, like a podcast, to be able to talk more rather than like a 5-10 minute YouTube video where you can edit it like super crisp, but you don't really go in depth. So apologies if I sound rambly to you. Still getting better in this podcast gig, I would say. But yeah, a lot of people, whether you're a fresh grad or you're a college student or you're someone who's been working already in the professional world, quote unquote, or you're a freelancer and you're just thinking about that. Maybe you want to get back into class. I think there's a bunch of reasons why you should take into consideration a master's or at least some points of reflection. So yun, that's my take. And that's really why I wanted to do this episode. And I think it really begins first with your grades. I don't think many people will say this, and I don't think I've really heard about this, but that's the first thing I'd tell my college self. If you could just do your grades or work harder a bit on your grades, it will make your master's journey a bit easier. Grades isn't everything, and I'm definitely an example of that. I've been accepted into a master's program, even though I didn't graduate with honors. But there are some options that I didn't push through on because of that grade requirement. There's some degrees, some colleges, some universities, especially in the Ivy Leagues, that seem to require a specific grade. I mean, that's also why they do their respective GMATs, GREs, or whatever you call it. But I do think if you have that opportunity still, if you could still push your grades a bit further, if you could still work a bit harder on that, I think it will help give you a bit of an edge. So, yun, I don't really need to expound more on that. Grades is a good signal, or it is the signal that people are using if you're applying for a master's. And if you want more choices, more options, especially for those who have that requirement, you do need to do something about your grades. That's number one. Number two, I think just like any job, any career, you always have to come back to your why. Why do you want to do masters? And I'm not really gonna go in depth in terms of like what's your calling in the world, your ikigai, or any of that stuff. I think there's a lot of advice about that, a lot of reflection you can do, even prayer, even conversations with other people. But what I'd like to propose would be a framework for the master's degrees. What type of master's should you pursue? Because I do think that there are different paths, and your why will fall into one of three paths. Ready? So the first path I wanted to share would be a master's as entry. Master's as entry. There are some careers, there's some jobs that explicitly require you to be able to have a master's degree or an equivalent and also be licensed to be able to practice. Whether that's a lawyer, a doctor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, you do have to have a master's degree, at least in the Philippine context, to be able to practice that. So if you wanted to pursue being a lawyer, if you wanted to pursue being a doctor, there's no other way to go about it but taking that master's. So it's pretty much a straightforward path if that's what you wanted to do. Another variation of master's as entry, I'd say, is if you want to transition into another field. Let's say that you're more on the marketing side of things, or you graduated with a communications degree, but you're more interested in wanting to head towards data science, for example, because you think that that's where the future is, or you just somehow have gotten more interested in numbers and AI and whatever you want to call it. A master's as entry, taking a data science master's, statistics master's, whatever master's, will help you transition towards that field in a more structured manner. Let's face it, I think if you're doing a full time job, it would be great if you can just proactively teach yourself the world right now, internet, the information you can get for free is endless. It's infinite. But because it's infinite, it takes a lot of curation. And I think master's degrees still help to an extent to be able to guide you on the first principles, the structures towards helping you transition to that degree or in that field, rather. So, in my example of wanting to transition into a data scientist one, it would be helpful for you to be able to learn from a different person, from some more professionals who have done it in application, rather than you fumbling about it on various ends, like which tool should I use? How do I go about doing this specific analysis? When in reality, there might be more things to take into consideration, such as the theories, such as the statistical models, such as the implications of what your data is saying. How can you tell if your data is misleading, or how do you know if it's noise or actual patterns? Uh, sorry, I rambled a bit more in there, but that's kind of what you're trying to get at. It's a more master's as an entry. You're also signaling to the recruiters, the companies that you're interested in, to say, hey, I may have had a college degree in communications, but as you can see, I have a master's degree in data science, which gives me the technical skills and competencies to signal to you that I am capable to do a data science role. So consider me. So I think that's the first path. If you're looking into entering a job or a career, be mindful. Does that career really require a master's degree or equivalent or license? And you do have to work a bit backwards to figure out how that all fits in or pans out on your own timelines, right? The second path, I would say, for masters would be masters as a edge, no? Competitive edge. What I mean by that is that in the world today, there's a lot of talent and workforce who are amazing, especially because information is readily accessible. I would say that with globalization and remote work, people have more opportunities, at least compared to before, to be able to take in different types of jobs that they may have not had the opportunity to do because of it. I mean, the BPO sector, for example, has been doing really great, giving opportunities to people to be able to do jobs for the global side of things. In terms of that, however, you do need to stand out with your employer, the person that you're trying to woo, trying to get an edge on, especially for your promotion cycle, your performance management, to signal to them that you have an edge. And I think that's another consideration for masters if you want to showcase to them that you have an edge. Examples of this, I would say, are people who are doing an MBA, people who do masters in industrial organizational psychology, HR, or different masters that are clearly related to a field in a job. It showcases to them that the recruiter that you have these capabilities to be able to do this job, that you have a more holistic backing, You're not just figuring things out on your own, but you do have a wealth of knowledge and resources to back it up. Or at least ideally, that's kind of how masters is. Ideally, it's a signal that showcases that you know some things, right? So I think that's where people come in. Um, People who take up MBAs or different masters, they end up entering into management consulting, or some of them get promoted, some of them become more middle managers because they showcase to whoever is looking into those roles that you have a holistic perspective on things. So I think that's something to take into consideration. Are you at a company where merit is also taken into consideration with other things or other signals? Something to think about. And the third path, moving on, is masters as interest. I'd say that masters as interest is more related to people who want to pursue PhDs, for example, where you're very interested in a specific field, let's say history, literature, physics, whatever, and you want to be able to do research on that specific topic. You want to be able to look into how the Philippines was pre-colonial days. You want to explore or investigate how culture was in the 1900s and contrast it to the 2000s, so on and so forth. And I think those are very reflective of people who have a deep interest in a specific field and really want to pursue it at all costs. It could be a way for them to pursue that as a job, which comes back to like the first path, masters as entry. But I think ultimately those are really for people who are just interested in a specific field and just want to deep dive on it. I think those are the three paths that you can think about in terms of why you want to do a master's. So think about that for yourself. Think about what it is that you're trying to get at the master's. Ask yourself, after I finish this master's, then what? What do I get, quote unquote, in return? Am I getting the credibility to be able to do a specific job or enter into a specific career? Am I doing a master's to signal to my employers or whoever that I am more competent than my peers? Am I getting a master's because I want to get more knowledge in a specific field that I'm interested in? Do I want to pursue the academe? Do I want to help push knowledge further on that specific field? Think about that. And each person's background is different. So there's really no right or wrong answer. It really just depends on you. I can share a bit more about myself maybe in the end, but that's how I'd give advice to myself back in college. Think about your why. I think the second thing that you have to take into consideration, third thing rather, because the first one is grades, second one is the master paths, so to speak. And then the third one are the considerations that you have to think about for masters. The reality is, masters will take resources out of you. Whatever background, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're in the Philippines, whether you're across the globe, whatever masters you'll take, whether it's Ivy League or local or public or private, so on and so forth, or remote, virtual, whatever, it will take resources. So think about that. It's going to take a variation of your time. It's going to take a variation of your money. It's going to take a variation of your energy. And it's going to take a variation of your attention. You must remember that if you're going to do a master's, it is work. It kind of is like college, but a degree higher, where you're expected to not just be spoon fed these conversations or these topics or concepts, but, well, at least from my experience, you're supposed to contribute to the class. You're supposed to come prepared and try to push everyone's understanding further. And to be able to do that, you do need to take some time to read the readings. You need a bit of more time to reflect on things. Honestly, you need a bit more time to even understand the language, especially if you have to read like academic journals. I think the language is just a bit different there, especially if you're new. And that will take energy and your attention as well. You'll be spending less time with your friends. You'll be spending less time on your hobbies. You'll be spending less in general because you have to pay for your tuition or you have to pay for things like your equipment, your software, your applications, your books, whatever. Or even the flip side, there's the opportunity cost of if you're doing a full time master's or you're doing a part time master's, there's the opportunity cost of working on things that can bring you more money in the short term. Maybe you could have done a side gig. Maybe you could have consulted for someone in whatever field. Maybe you could have had a full time job instead of a full time master's to be able to increase your salary, at least in the moment. Whatever context you're in, just be honest with yourself. What is it that you're capable of? Do you have savings? Do you have an emergency fund? Are you the breadwinner? Is your family reliant on you or are you relying on your family? How long can you rely on them? All of these things, I think, do have to be considered for the masters. There are some people who drop out sadly in master's programs. I mean, even me, I'm taking a LOA because of time and energy because we just underestimate it once we're there. And hopefully, my sharing with you for that kind of makes you take it into consideration, or at least be more intentional on your path towards a master's or not. So, those are the things I'd take into consideration. One would be your grades. If you could still push it further, do so. Number two would be think about the master path that you want to take. What are you going to get in return for a master's? Number three, what are the considerations you have to think about for a master's, whether it's your time, money, energy, attention, all of those are going to take resources out of you. So remember that. And putting it all together, I can just share a bit about my story for master's. Hopefully that kind of helps. So when I entered college, I studied in Ateneo de Manila University, or the Ateneo, however people like call it, or Arneo as people tease us there. I had the intention of going to law school. And the reason for that was whenever I'd go through school, as I went through high school and college, my parents always encouraged me there. My mom wanted to become a lawyer, but circumstances prevented her from doing so. She was close to taking the bar, but sadly, she had to defer. And a lot of that influence of wanting to become a lawyer, and I mean, honestly, like playing Phoenix Wright, y'all, if you know, you know. That Nintendo DS game was great. I think they also have it in the Switch. But anyway, Suits, even. I think those were like the things that influenced me to be more and more gung ho to pursue law, was kind of what influenced me. So in college senior year, I took extra English units because you're required to do that for law school. If not, you have to do prerequisites, if I'm not mistaken, in law school. So I did that early. I also took the test. I think this is when they applied the LSAT equivalent, or gosh, however you call it. And fortunately, I passed Ateneo Law School. Yay, hooray. But as I was nearing graduation, I also pursued other things in senior year, more like a YOLO, enjoy, see what I can learn, make the most out of senior year. So I was very active in sector based organizations. I was interested in organizational development. I was involved and took a minor even on development studies. And all of that made me reflect, do I really want to go to law school? Or was it more a dream that my parents wanted for me? Was it because it was more stable compared to a path of unknown? Who knows? But ultimately, I felt like, you know what? Maybe law school isn't for me. And I deferred. It was a bit hard to break the news to my parents, but at least I had the job offer at the time, so I could use that to alleviate their concerns or their worries. But it's just me being honest to myself that law school didn't seem like a fit with me. I have much appreciation for the law. I enjoyed playing Phoenix Wright. I enjoyed watching Suits, but I learned that the reality of law was not from what you consume in media. The reality of the law and preparing for the law, the bar, classes being the Socratic method, you having a more, I don't know, maybe aggressive debate like stance on things just didn't feel like me. So that's why I didn't pursue with law school. Um, Hi, Ma, if you are listening to this, that's really why I didn't pursue it. And even though you joke every now and then, that's why I don't pursue it. So thanks. Fast forward a few years, I graduated college. I worked from big corp to startup land to another startup. And I was getting myself more and more interested in the field called product, tech, and user experience. I think this was the time when Airbnb was starting out. There was the podcast Masters of Scale. It was so fun just consuming that content, thinking about how can you better design experiences for people rather than forcing solutions to a problem that doesn't exist. That's what really attracted me to the field, and that's why I got there. At one point, I was doing user experience research, which is similar to market research, basically. You know, you do surveys, FGDs, usability testing to help improve your design of the experience or services of whatever company you're working for. At least that's it in a nutshell, right? And I felt like I needed to do masters. It wasn't like law school, right? I didn't even want to enter law school. The first path, masters as entry. I didn't want to do that. Here naman, I felt like I was lacking skills and capability. I didn't have an edge. I felt like if there were people who came in as UX researchers from different sides, I think they'd have an edge over me. And ultimately, the contribution I bring to the table to the company just felt like I hit a wall or I hit a limit. I based a lot of my learnings and frameworks on anything I could read, which was great, right? But I felt a difficulty in explaining my methodology, my research methodology. Why should you do a survey over a face-to-face interview? What are the things to take into consideration if you were to do a focus group discussion? How do you structure a usability testing in a manner that you feel confident? How many users do you need to reach out to or interview? Those are some of the questions you encounter in UX research, especially from stakeholders. And I could answer those. But deep down, it was difficult to trace it back to an academic basis. And I felt like I needed that edge. In the Philippines, I did a scoping of sorts to look into what are master's degrees that can help you in UX research. And there isn't exactly a degree for that. There isn't exactly like a, hey, here's a master's for UX research, right? So I just looked into, okay, if there's no master's in UX research, maybe I can look abroad. But then I was like, I can't even afford that. The visa, I don't know if I can part from my family for so long at that time. And I came across and the realization as well that, you know, UX research, market research, if you trace it back into its quote unquote roots, like the avatar or the ancestry, you can kind of link it back to psychology and behavioral science. Ultimately, you're studying a person and trying to understand the underlying motives, emotions, factors that influence them to do a certain behavior. So, after that thinking, I reached out to a friend of mine who was doing market research. He was doing clinical psychology, got into a call, and kind of just shared with him my perspective and my thoughts on things. After that, got some feedback, got some advice from different folks, and I decided to pursue a master's in social psychology. So that's how it happened. I wanted to build an edge based on a realistic assessment of where I was at in my career. I wanted to level up my skills. I also was interested in the field of social psychology and behavioral science. I mean, especially that time, Adam Grant, Angela Duckworth, Katie Milkman, so on and so forth, right? Like even Atomic Habits, which is like the most used book that everyone talks about now and everyone is sick of because it's mainstream and all that, was just beginning in those times. And I was so interested in that field. And that's what made me pursue it. How can we help bridge our understanding of people to be able to direct them towards more positive behaviors through this field? And that's still my motivation to this day. So, yun, that's how I was thinking about it. It was a great opportunity. UP looked like it had a strong academic career in terms of the folks. When I did a bit of research on the program, it seemed like a closest fit. Honestly, it was a toss up between Ateneo and UP. And I think the reality was, well, the tuition is far kinder in UP, for lack of a better word, or for, just say that. Let's just say that. So that's what made it convenient. It was also a time of the pandemic, so virtual was pretty much helpful. And that's what made me decide to pursue the master's overall. For full transparency, though, I did take an LOA, a leave of absence for a bit. I'm currently in my LOA right now, gonna be ending it soon. But just to let you know, that's where I'm at. Um, I think the master's experience, that can be a whole nother episode with someone as well, sharing their experience in the master's. Maybe someone from full time, maybe someone who's part time, someone who did it here in the Philippines, someone who did it abroad. So many things that we can discuss. But that's where I'd like to end today. That's the advice I'd love to give myself in the past if I would be, oh, should I do a master's or not? So I hope that was helpful. I hope you enjoyed our chat, and I'll see you in the next one. Kita kits. Bye.